Welcome to Learning is the New Working. If you're a regular listener, you may have heard some of our Season 7 episodes, our first collaborative venture with the Red Thread research team. We recorded 9 episodes on the topic of people and talent management in purpose-driven organizations. I loved the experience, and we took the research from Red Thread as our starting point and made a wish list of people who are doing great talent, learning and leadership work across a range of iconic companies. And we learned so much about the history of stakeholder capitalism, what it takes to be a purpose-driven and stakeholder-aligned company, and more importantly, what were the implications for talent, HR, and learning leaders. We had a great set of conversations with leaders from a diverse set of companies, including organizations such as J&J, Johnson & Johnson, Medtronic, Sanofi, IDEO, S&P Global, EY, and several others. Each represented a different stage on the purpose journey and brought a diverse range of perspectives to the conversation, and they taught me a lot. Our season sponsor was San Francisco-based edtech vendor NovoEd, and the team there did an awesome job of engaging on the topic, following along with our conversations, blogging their perspective and point of view, and adding additional material to the conversation. You can find all that material at www.novoed.com/purpose. And while you're there, you should really check out their collaborative learning platform. For the season finale, Stacia and myself sat down with a whole grab bag of audio clips and with Todd Moran, Chief Learning Strategist at NovoEd, who did a fantastic job of moderating, and Declan Fox, who's the Director of Product and Content Marketing at NovoEd. We had a few hundred registered guests for a live webinar, and we discussed our learnings and specifically what we thought might be useful for learning and development leaders. Today we're going to share a recording of that event. You can also find a written transcript of the episode at www.learningisthenewworking.org. Just click on the Season 7 link. And despite the fact that my mum made it crystal clear that I had a face for radio, you can actually see a video of the event at the NovoEd site. I also wanted to mention that our second and current collaboration with Red Thread is the launch of their very first season of their own podcast, which they call Workplace Stories. We publish that podcast every other week, and it aims to bring their research to life with conversations and stories with the many people who engage in their unique and powerful approach to research. Please subscribe at www.redthreadresearch.com/podcast, or of course on your own favorite podcast platform. Just search for Workplace Stories by Red Thread Research. But now, here's a rebroadcast of our March 11th webinar called The Role of Purpose in Supercharging Workplace Learning.
My name is Todd Moran. I'm the Chief Learning Strategist at NovoEd, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you may be calling in from, and welcome to The Role of Purpose in Supercharging Workplace Learning. For folks that are not as deeply familiar with, perhaps you are a first-time caller, long-time listener in the podcast vernacular of Learning is the New Working, but this long-running series by Chris Peary, who joins us today, amongst others, has been a really phenomenal approach. This idea of tackling the future of workplace learning and doing it with some really critical, insightful conversations across very cutting-edge individuals, organizations, enterprises, is a pretty phenomenal effort. So folks that have been tuning in since September of last year with this Season 7, it was a chance for Chris and team at Learning Features Group to pair with Red Thread Research, who is also here today, and NovoEd, and to bring you Season 7 about Is Purpose Working? And there are some phenomenal organizations that have been part of this experience these past 4 or 5 months, from J&J to SP Global, EY, lots of folks on this side. So really insightful. I'd love to get a thought as I move over to intros here momentarily. If you have been listening, is there an episode that stands out? Was there some conversation that really struck you as you heard from some of those phenomenal guests and others across those 10 episodes? We'd love to hear that. Put it into the chat. And without further ado, let me do this. We've got a pretty phenomenal ensemble that we've collected and gathered today. And I think Chris can check my math, but this may be the first time against this Learning is the New Working series that we've pulled together a kind of end of season showcase for folks. And I think this opportunity for that, which you've been listening to interact live, I think is a pretty powerful piece. One unfortunate side for folks, we don't have Dani Johnson with us today. She is hopefully blissfully on maternity leave, enjoying her time, but was a huge proponent and component of this entire series. If you've listed, she's the co-founder of Red Thread Research, and as her colleague Stacia, who we'll introduce in a moment, shared recently on LinkedIn, we are going to bring Dani's virtual voice to bear in this session today. As well as that, we're going to try to bring in a couple other clips from some other really poignant positioning and statements of others in the group. But let me do this. Let's get a bit more intimate with this. So you see the titles and the names, but give me a sense. We'll take down the slide. Let's kind of bring these folks to the forefront here. And as I get a chance to introduce them, they can come on camera and let's start this dialogue really outside of slide and make it more of a discussion. So first and foremost, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Chris Peary. He is the founder and CEO of the Learning Futures Group, and as a ex-Microsofter, both as a partner-level general manager and CLO, also a senior faculty member at the Joss Bersin Academy, and senior fellow with the Future Workplace Academy, and really a mastermind of sorts around this entire series, as well as this particular season. Chris, welcome.
Thanks so much, Todd, and thanks, NovaWeb, for doing this. As you rightly said, it's the first time we've done an end-of-season wrap-up. I'm super excited and very nervous.
I love it. And joined as your incredibly strong partner who you brought in for the season 7 in Red Thread Research is Stacia Sherman-Gar. It is an absolute pleasure. Stacia is, for folks that have spent time with her, just an absolute expert, researcher, analyst, thought leader in this space. Was a huge anchor across 8 years at Bersin Research, that taken over by Deloitte, and has obviously a frequent publisher in lots of periodicals and journals from Wall Street Journal, New York Times. It is a distinct pleasure as well to have you with us, Stacia. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Todd. Really a pleasure to bring all of this together. We had all these wonderful conversations, so pulling it together for folks is exciting.
And then I have the additional pleasure of bringing to bear my colleague, Declan Fox, who joins us as both our content and product marketer, expert from the NovaWeb side, but has done a ton of work both in terms of publishing and writing articles and ebooks, referred to as our resident expert in purpose on the NovaWeb side. So Declan, welcome to you as well.
Good to be here. Just wanted to say that it's been a great collaboration with Red Thread and Learning Futures Group, and it's been a purpose journey, and I think we've learned a lot. So looking forward to diving into the conversation.
It's a lot to distill. If we look back across what is September on, 10 episodes, over 10 hours of recorded time, not to mention the countless hours of effort and push. But I think it might help for some context setting. There's a couple areas we want to cover with folks today, a bit about the state of the state. Let's get in for all those practitioners on the line and execs that live and breathe in talent HR. What is the role of L&D? Make it a bit more applicable to those folks, where to get started, how to get started. And then I'm going to press all of you for a little bit of your predictions at the close. But let's start here. When you think about the origin story of this and why even make the pursuit of this series and the research that the underpinning of that, Stacia, can I throw this your way? Help us a little bit. Why the effort? Why the focus? And what are some pieces that came out from you?
The origin story of the whole project, if you will, is actually comes back to a conversation or a meeting in person when we did that in Washington, D.C., September 2019. And my team and I were brainstorming, what are we going to do next year? What's the research agenda going to be? And one of our teammates came and she said, I really think we should do some research on purpose. And Dani and I looked at her and we're like, really? It seems a little, that's a little outside of kind of wherever, what our thinking is. And this is a prime example of where kind of the diversity of thought is so powerful, right? And she came in and she just made this really compelling case. She's like, I'm seeing it in these places. The Business Roundtable just put out this statement. It was a month later. I think that this is going to be a thing. And so we started kind of digging through it, and she completely convinced me. So I by the time we got to January 2020, which is actually when we kicked off the research, I could see it. But then what obviously happened was, this global pandemic, and something that it once seemed to kind of have had some of its own energy, but, wasn't like front and center. With the pandemic, just suddenly became this thing. What is our purpose? Whether it's with organizations who were doing things that were kind of outside of traditional business activities because of the pandemic, or people who were, for whatever reasons, whether they were mothers, caregivers, et cetera, saying, why am I working? What am I doing? This sense of deep individual purpose. And so we were exploring that really in real time with the research that we did. And we got to the end of writing the research, and we were talking it over actually with Chris, because Chris and I we'd had this wonderful meeting actually in January, and we were telling him about this work. And I said to Chris, I would love to get some more stories. Like, we had some good ones, but they were kind of pre-pandemic because that's what people were willing to talk about. But we just went through this, we are going through this insane time. What are people doing now? And so that's how this vision of doing the podcast and bringing people on to tell their stories at the moment came to life.
Chris, your sourcing of all those stories, the folks wanting to pull forward, why purpose? Why now? Why were you met in terms of trying to sort of recruit those folks to have the guests and have the position starting, wait a minute, that's not even on our radar, or give us some sense of perspective there?
It's kind of interesting. I was already thinking about this. Danny and I actually had a conversation. We're both very skeptical people. And, if you've listened to the first episode, you'll know that in August of 2019, pre-pandemic, the Business Roundtable came out with this statement of purpose. And at the time, it's a very short, succinct statement. And it basically says it was the end of what they call shareholder primacy. And it says, we, the Business Roundtable, 181 muckety-muck CEOs of big companies, said, we've realized something. We no longer just serve shareholders, but we serve a whole range of constituents, including employees and the community that we work in and so on and so forth. And Danny and I just kind of naturally rolled our eyes at this. And this is the conversation that Stacia referred to. And we're like, come on, this is purpose washing. This is just advertising and PR, because people are demanding more of corporations these days. They are holding them accountable for doing the right thing in a number of different ways. So that was the thesis that was born. And then as the pandemic came along, we said, what a perfect lens through which to dig into this and see whether it is purpose washing, or to see whether, there is kind of really truth to this. And of course, what we learned was extraordinary. And what we learned was all of business, through the pandemic, through anxiety about what technology is doing to the workplace, really served to underscore, our collective humanity. And this idea of purpose became really powerful. And some of my skepticism fell away. We learned so much, as Declan said, through these conversations. And it started for me by recognizing two things, the two preconceptions that I had. One was that purpose was all about just doing good in the world, altruism. And it's not. It's more sophisticated than that. And then secondly, how, as you can think of purpose as motivation. The Aaron Hurst episode that we had was, he's an expert on this topic. He's been thinking about it all his professional life. And, he was great. He said, this is about humanity. And it's about what motivates people. It turns out that what motivates people once they have enough to eat and a warm roof over their head and a good internet connection is serving a purpose, serving a higher purpose. So, yeah, I learned a lot, and I'm definitely less skeptical about the concept.
No, it's brilliant. And I think we've even had some of the opening attendees sort of fire in why they chose to attend today. And it's that same line. I think Bianca was recalling this idea of, how can we be more efficient in motivating employees and leaders, in the midst of all that is happening right now in those competing